We're going to try to go through the laws of bishul. What is bishul? The laws of cooking on Shabbos. Right, what you can do, what you can't do, what's considered to be cooking, what's not considered to be cooking now. I apologise in advance, they're kind of involved, but they are very, very important, because bishul is a isur d'oraisa, is a Torah prohibition. And we certainly don't want to get involved in, doing things that the Torah prohibits on Shabbos. If somebody wants to do it because they don't believe, that's their business. But to do it because you're not aware, that's something we're going to try. We'll try to avoid that over here. So the most basic definition of bishul, of cooking, right, is to change the makeup of something by using heat. Right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know right now. It's prohibited to cook on Shabbos, it's prohibited to use fire on Shabbos, and it's prohibited to cook things with any kind of a offshoot of fire. Right? So, for example, we'll see later on, if you've got a hot plate, even though the hot plate doesn't have any fire, which is obviously visible, but nevertheless, it's going to have all kinds of repercussions as well. There's no difference whatsoever with regards to hidden fire or open fire, right? So you've got fire that's underneath something, and then you put, there's something called a blech, which is a copper plate, which is placed on top of fire. Then that's considered to be fire. There's no, it's not.
You're not allowed to put stuff in by the blech.
On Shabbos itself, directly onto the blech, it's a problem. We'll talk about it, it's Hashem. Before Shabbos, you can put them on to make sure that it's going to be hot for Shabbos. And there is going to be a way, which we'll learn in Mitzvah Hashem, of putting things onto a hot plate or onto that blech, onto that copper plate, by not putting it directly on, by putting it onto something else. In the meantime, but in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll talk about it. Liquids can also have a din of being bishul, which means if you've got boiling hot water, so let's say, for example, you've got a Shabbos urn, right? You can't put food into that, because that's considered to be cooking. So, for example, you could take kugel and you could put it into one of these plastic. They've got special plastic bags that are waterproof and heat-proof, but they heat up. Right? I don't know how they work exactly. They don't melt. That's the thing. And you might say to yourself, "Well, hold on a second. If the isser over here, if the prohibition is to do with fire, then I could take that, put my kugel in one of those bags, and put it in on Shabbos, put it into the Shabbos urn." Make it nice and hot, and then take it out. But you can't do that, because liquids are also considered to be cooking as well. That's going to have a lot of practical application for us, less to do with kugel, right, and more to do with making tea or coffee, right? If you've got boiling hot water, what exactly are you allowed to do in order to make your cup of tea or your cup of coffee? And Mitzvah Hashem, we'll talk about it when we get a kli shlishi. That's one way around the issue. Yeah, but don't reveal all these things right now. It's true that there is a halachic disagreement amongst the early authorities about whether cooking with liquid is a Torah prohibition or a rabbinical prohibition. Most of the Rishonim, the early authorities, are of the opinion that it's a Torah prohibition, which means it's definitely something we need to be concerned about, need to look out for. Okay, let's have a look and see. What practical problems could we have? Well, for example, there might be a problem with adding challah into your soup, right? There might be a problem with adding croutons into your soup, right? Huh?
Because you're cooking the croutons.
You might be cooking them on, right? If this soup is what's called yad soledit, if it's boiling hot. But we'll see all of these practical applications about what you can and what you can't do. I
think the challah you put.
Croutons have been baked already, right? So
croutons have been baked, so there is a question about whether there is bishul achar afia, whether you can cook something after it's been baked or not. If they're fried, for sure, that's okay. But the problem is nobody uses these things anymore. In the olden days, when I was growing up, we had the croutons, those little yellow, ubiquitous yellow croutons. First of all, they were fried. Secondly, they were made with, what was that yellow dye called tartrazin, something like that. sunset yellow, whatever it was called, sunshine yellow, I don't know. These things were unbelievably unhealthy, which is probably why they were so tasty, actually. Nowadays they bake them and they don't use that dye. So I think that maybe it's a natural colour, I don't know. That's probably too expensive, I would have thought, no? Im Kolzeh, this is a halacha which is not applicable to people living in England whatsoever, but it is permissible to heat up food through the heat of the sun. Which means that if you've got, I don't know, let's say you've got something that you want to warm it up and it's boiling hot outside, you could stick it on the table, on the the garden table or something, and let it heat up over there. That is not a problem. Solar power is going to be a problem because once you've translated the solar into power, then it becomes like heat, right? But the sun itself is not a problem. It's prohibited to cook using a heat source that was heated up via the sun.
Okay.
Right, and that was really your question to begin with, right? But it applies over here to the tray as well, which means that you can't put the tray out to heat it up in order to put food onto it, because that already is too similar to using regular heat in order to to warm it up, right? So I'm just thinking, I don't know. If you were to take, let's say for example, you've got challah that you want to defrost, right? Could you put it next? I don't think you can put it next to the window. Could you put it on the windowsill, right? It's nice and hot outside, but presumably the sun is going to come through the glass and it's going to heat up even more, right? And that I think that's going to be prohibited. You'd have to put it directly outside, let it get warmed up through the sun's heat directly, and not through something which is going to to channel the sun's heat and turn it into.
The window itself isn't transmitting the heat. It's still the sunlight that's transmitting.
No, but the window is going to heat it up even more. It's forbidden to cook on Shabbos any item, even if the item can be eaten uncooked, right? Which means, like, let's say you've got something. Help me out. What have we got? We've got
an apple.
An apple, right? So you could eat the apple in its raw state. It's delicious, right? But if you want to have a baked apple, for example, you can't do that. Even though you say that there's definitely it's logical to say, well, look, if I could eat it the way it is right now, so it's not really cooking. Maybe I'm enhancing, but I'm not cooking, right? But nevertheless, halacha says you can't do that. Why is that? Again, I mean, it's improving. You're improving something. It's not something that can be done on Shabbos, right? If you take the apple, you want the apple baked, then that means that when you come and you bake it, you're improving it. You're making it better than it was.
The chalent, same thing.
So that's before Shabbos.
Yeah, by you proving it as Shabbos goes.
That's okay. You're not doing anything on Shabbos itself, which is you got everything ready and you put it on before Shabbos, right? And some people some people have the custom that when they make their chalent, right, that they just put all the raw ingredients in before Shabbos, and then they just put it on before Shabbos and just leave it to stew.
Well, that's my wife does.
That's how she does it. Yeah, that's okay. It's been cooked on Shabbos. It's all been prepared before. The problem over here is not the cooking on Shabbos itself. The problem that we're going through over here is cooking on Shabbos.
So in that situation, can you go up and
Oh, that's a good question. No, you shouldn't. Right.
So
you've got to be careful. You should not stir the cholent. When can you stir? When can you stir the cholent?
When you put in your bowl.
When the cholent has been. No, I'm telling you even before that. Right. Let's say you're concerned that maybe it smells like it might be burning at the bottom or something. Right.
Oh, if it's gonna get
if my wife, when she makes cholent, the cholent is basically ready to eat before Shabbos.
Right.
And then she just puts it onto the hot plate, and then of course it carries on cooking, but it's already edible. Not like yours. Your wife, right? It's got to cook through Shabbos to become edible.
So you're saying you can cook beforehand and initiate the process and then continue to, but what if you want to serve it and you're actually going to spoon in?
That's okay. Well, once you're taking it all out and putting it into bowls and putting it out, then that's fine. The question is whether you're allowed. But what's the problem? The problem is that when you come to stir it, not serving it in the middle of the night, somewhere you decide that you wake up and you have just got to stir your cholent. If you don't, then you're going to be really not your normal friendly self, right? You'll be completely on edge.
Especially with
The problem is
guests.
if you've got a cholent that wasn't cooked properly before Shabbos and it's cooking during Shabbos, when you come to stir it, what you're doing is that you're improving, you're speeding up the cooking process, which is a problem on Shabbos. Right? Again, there's no problem with my not doing anything and letting the thing cook itself. There is a problem with my stirring it around and making, what's the word?
You should really stir it.
I don't know. The truth is that my wife makes a cholent and she puts it on the hot plate and just leaves it there. She never touches it until. Anyway, what about a microwave on Shabbos? No. So everybody here knows, of course, that you can't use a microwave on Shabbos, right? Right. Why can't you use a microwave on Shabbos?
Because of electricity.
Creating a circuit.
So let's say we're going to put the microwave onto a time switch, right?
But it creates microwaves and you're improving your food.
Oh, so is that are you cooking?
Right.
Yeah.
You are, because you're boiling because how microwaves work is it's heating the water molecules in the food, so it's cooking the liquid.
But you're not cooking with fire. Is it a Torah prohibition or a rabbinical prohibition?
You can't use a kettle because that's boiling the water.
It's a Torah prohibition or is it a biblical prohibition? And you say what?
I think it's a Torah prohibition because you're.
And he says rabbinical. So I suggest the two of you step outside for a few moments, and let's just see. The truth is that you're both right.
Ooh.
There are halachic authorities.
Oh.
I like to be as as all encompassing as possible. Really, really. We're very pluralistic in this class. According to some opinions, there's a rabbinical prohibition over here. According to others, it's a Torah prohibition. The real question over here is, how do you define the cooking process that goes on inside of the microwave? So again, there's no, I'm not going to give you a definitive ruling. It's forbidden, that's for sure. Before you pour out soup, it really is best to make sure that that there's no crumbs in the bowl, right? Because again, the problem over here is that you're pouring boiling hot soup into the bowl, and if there are crumbs over there, then there could be a chashash, that there could be a concern that maybe you're going to cook them when the hot liquid goes into the bowl. The same would be true, I imagine, with if there were drops of cold water in there as well, actually. So if you've just washed the plates in order to be able to serve them up to somebody, you have to make sure that they're dry before you pour the hot soup into them. That's why, again, if you put your challah in afterwards, that's going to be okay. Don't put your challah in before and then pour the hot soup onto it. Don't put the mandalach, the croutons in before and then pour the soup on top of them.
So here's a question then, because quite often my mum will cook lokshen in advance and then put the cooked lokshen, it's cold but it's cooked, in the bowls, and then put the soup on the top.
The emes is like this: ein bishul achar bishul, which means that the lokshen's been cooked, so it's not going to be cooked again. But I would suggest, maybe if you ask your mum if she could put the lokshen in after she's put the soup in, just to avoid any kind of problem that there might be. But again, in general, there is a klal, there is a general rule inside of the laws of kashrus which says ein bishul achar bishul. Once something's been cooked, it's cooked, and halachically it can't be cooked again. Right? You can warm it up, but that's not cooking; it's cooked already, right? And that's a lot less problematic. Here, and another thing that you need to be concerned about. For example, you take something out of the freezer in order to use it for Shabbos. So you want to take out a challah from the freezer and you want to use it for the next meal. If you put it, again, the challah is going to come with, it's got a little bit of a little bit of ice or frost or whatever is on it. So if you put it next to a heat source, right, where it could become yad soledet bo, and I'm not 100% sure how this is going to happen, because yad soledet bo is very hot. It's 45 degrees. Right, that's boiling hot. But if you were to put it over there, it's a problem, because you're now what are you doing? You're melting the ice and you're causing it to get cooked up, right? And that's a problem on Shabbos.
It was already cooked. Again, from the way the challah was made.
The challah, yes, but not the ice that's on it. It's been taken out of the freezer, which means
you can't just let something defrost.
You can let something defrost for sure, and you can even defrost something by putting it on top of, let's say, on top of the urn. Right, but you've got to be careful over there that it's not so hot that today, the truth is today Shabbos urns are much safer than they used to be. I remember when we were kids, the Shabbos urn, it got so hot, the container itself, and you couldn't touch the container. You could only touch. They had plastic handles and a plastic spout, like to pour the water out, and that was really the only part that you could touch. Everything else was boiling hot. Nowadays, they're a lot safer than that. They're a lot more, insulated, and the outside doesn't get that hot anymore. But if you've got an old-fashioned Shabbos urn, I think it might be a problem to take the challah straight out of the freezer and put that on top of the Shabbos urn to defrost it, because it's going to get so hot over there that it's going to cause the water particles and the frost and the ice to melt and to become boiled up, which is going to be a problem. That's the equivalent of cooking on Shabbos.